I'm reading the story on your website. Trudeau announced about $1 billion, and some of it's going to bring home Canadians stranded around the world. I think that's a good idea. Some of it is going for personal protective equipment. I think that's a good idea. But I notice in your report that $2.6 million of taxpayers' money is going to, quote, research on how to combat discrimination, racism, and social media misinformation. I would expect that from the Chinese dictatorship, but Trudeau is literally spending $2.6 million not fighting the virus, but fighting people like you and me who might say Wuhan, because apparently that's racist, but calling the German measles ain't. I just think it shows that even in the midst of this crisis, Trudeau will put political correctness first.
Well, yeah, that's actually, I think, the only thing they're interested in screening people for is whether or not they've tweeted anything unpleasant that uses the word Wuhan. So famously, the health minister, Patty Hajdu, had said a virus knows no borders. So the government was not going to do any border screening. But certainly if you try to enter Canada with a T-shirt that says Wuhan flu, you'll be detained. Not for having the Wuhan flu, if you do, but for wearing a T-shirt that uses that term. Yeah, it's always the things that the government chooses to focus on, the most minuscule and arguably ridiculous issues in comparison to the bigger picture. And look, like you mentioned, Ezra, a lot of those things that are being spent on are not unreasonable things. However, if you want to take a serious approach to containment, you have to stop for Canada being geographically removed from the point of origin of the virus. The one thing we could have done right from the get-go was travel restriction, was travel screening, in some cases shutting down points of entry altogether. I wouldn't have gone to shutting down land border between Canada and the U.S., but flights from China. I mean, why was everyone not subjected to quarantine coming from a hot zone? So the reality is the Liberals didn't want to do what was ultimately settled on by a number of countries, even liberal countries, because they said it was racist. And even now, they're not acknowledging that the importation problem is going to be the number one way that this virus is spread within Canada.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I think it's wrong. Viruses can be stopped at the border because it's not inevitable that we allow people to come in here. It's, I suppose it's like when you have a border wall around your country, maybe you don't need to have high fences around individual homes. That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.